Welcome to another edition of The Plane Guys. I'm Jeffrey Thomas, the plane guy in Australia, and welcome to my colleague Richard Godfrey, the plane guy in Germany.
Well, hello, Jeffrey. You don't look
Yeah,
very plain to me.
no, I'm not. So we're looking at the first two episodes of The Plane Guys, the Silk Air tragedy, and then the Air France 447 tragedy, and all the questions you've sent through. There's a swag of them, really some great questions. And so, Richard, let's get cracking onto these. The first one
Yeah.
is from Witwiskinsky 2280, and I'm probably pronounced that completely incorrectly. My apologies. Thank you. A truly independent investigative organization is the only way to get money, religion, law, and geopolitics out of conclusions. Aviation is as safe as it is only because the truth about why things go wrong has been upheld as a primary driver of safety. Your Silk story underlines how human behavior is as much part of safety or lack thereof as is the mechanical side and the procedural part. Top forensic psychiatrists should also be part of the investigative teams. Well, I agree with all of that. What about you, Richard?
Yeah, completely agree. A very good comment. And absolutely, we need to get the forensics psychiatrists involved as a standard part of any team. One thing having, the satellite and the radar and the aircraft data, obviously the flight data recorder will help on that, but the cockpit voice recorder can also helps significantly. It records not just the sounds in the cockpit in terms of voice, but sounds in the cockpit from the instruments. And it was very revealing also on the Air France 447 situation, listening to the cockpit voice recordings.
Yes, and we should state too that, I know many of you realize this, but when it comes to an air crash, if it's a Boeing like the 777 with MH370, then Boeing is party to the investigation. It was Rolls-Royce powered, so therefore the British and Rolls-Royce are party to the investigation. Inmarsat is also party to it. And so the major suppliers, the key suppliers, are party to the investigation and their country's investigative bodies. So what we need if we don't get ICAO to oversee these things, what we need is those countries' investigative units to be more vocal in their criticism, which we have seen recently if a report is simply inaccurate or key parts have been left out. So we should just mention that, it's not just the country who owns the air crash, there are other parties to the investigation that they need to be more strident in their criticisms if necessary. So, damn Nelly, Jeffrey, thanks for highlighting how countries can corrupt investigations and be willing to stand up to them. It's very brave. In quotes, the only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. Edmund Burke. That's very profound, Richard.
Yeah, indeed. Again, a very profound comment, and yeah, we are doing our best to uh, take out the corruption from an investigation. And I know we've had questions, for example, on China Eastern Airlines, and that is a typical case where there's very difficult to get detailed information out of China on what happened to that aircraft.
Mm.
Um,
Well, in
so
fact, that's the next question from Bipolar Bear 9917. So pilot suicide is not a black swan event. China Eastern Flight 5735 on the 21st of March 2022 is yet another pilot suicide that you guys haven't mentioned. Well, we haven't really got to it yet, but Rich, I'll let you talk about that one, Richard.
yeah, it's a a very important accident in terms of the investigation, which is still ongoing. And it's definitely on our list of those accidents that we will go into in depth in a future episode. There is no final report on the China Eastern Airlines Flight 5735, and that is now 3 years after the crash. The Chinese aviation regulator has not released any comprehensive final report detailing the cause of the disaster. It has missed updates. Beijing missed the annual deadline for the interim statements in March 2025, contrary both to their own domestic guidelines and the international guidelines. And the findings are inconclusive so far. So, despite recovering both the flight recorders, the data recorder, and the cockpit recorder, and years of analysis, we still haven't been able to come to a conclusion officially. And so it really beggars belief how long it will take for China to publish a final report on, and you're quite right, Bipolar Bear, to raise this example.
And of course, all the while the Chinese don't admit that it was pilot suicide, the people on the street would think that it was a Boeing 737, so it's another black mark against Boeing. So, there's other dynamics to this. Of course, notwithstanding the terrible tragedy of the lives that were lost and the relatives left behind who really deserve something far, far better than what they've got so far.
Yeah.
So, now, I'm not even going to try and pronounce the name of this one. It's 1087 at the very end. Question for the plane guys. If Air France 447 was a Boeing, would the tragedy be avoided? You
Well,
go, Richard.
um, very nice and very slanted question. There's a huge debate in the industry and huge number of followers, both of Boeing and of Airbus. But the fact is, Airbus and Boeing and other manufacturers have dramatically improved safety over the years. If you go back over the last 60 years, the number of accidents compared with the number of aircraft in the air has come down significantly. And in 2023 was the first year where there were no fatal accidents at all. Um, and if you go back, say, over the last 10 years, there have been nine fatal accidents where a Boeing aircraft was involved, and five where an Airbus aircraft were involved. But hardly any of those can be put down to the aircraft as the cause of the accident. There were pilot errors. There were pilots flying without a valid license. There was a runway incursion. There was one aircraft shot down by a missile. There was a suicide pilot. There was a bomb on board. There were maintenance procedures which were not followed. And none of these are any issues with the aircraft. So you have to look beyond, is it an Airbus or a Boeing, at the wider picture. For example, in Pakistan, following the accident with a PIA flight 8303, the investigation found that 262 out of 860 pilots in Pakistan did not have valid licenses. They got someone else to sit the exam for them. Their licenses were faked. It is incredible, and that's got nothing to do with how good an aircraft is.
Yeah, good point, Richard. In fact, that was an Airbus A320, that Pakistan flight. It was just extraordinary.
Yeah.
Complete foul up by the pilot. But, last year, for another story, on the same question, what's safer, the Boeing or the Airbus? Right now, there's about an equal number of Airbus aeroplanes flying around the world as there are Boeing aeroplanes flying around the world. And I did an analysis of how many service bulletins were out there, which is service bulletin or an airworthiness directive, which is you have to fix something up on the aeroplane, either at its next maintenance or immediately. An airworthiness directive is an immediate fix. And I totaled them all up, and it was about 50-50. So there wasn't any sort of distinct trend one way or the other. They all have issues of one kind or another, but they both make great aeroplanes, no doubt about it. So, signal electrician. Surely the pilots should have applied pitot heat. Thank goodness that you are still here, Richard. Good work. And also from Tom Brown, 1898. I saw Captain Sullenberger on CBS news program where he was in an Airbus simulator demonstrating the workings of the side sticks. His conclusion was that the accident was far less likely in a plane with a yoke, such as a Boeing, because the yokes are mechanically linked. In an Airbus, the right hand literally does not know what the left hand is doing. And just to sort of, for the listeners, sorry, for the viewers, Captain Sullenberger was the gentleman who landed the US Air Airbus A320 on the Hudson. So a highly qualified Airbus pilot. Richard, your feedback on that one?
Yeah, first of all, the subject of the pitot heaters, heat was applied and switched on during the flight. It just was insufficient for the amount of icing that occurred in a relatively short space of time in this case. You make a very good point about side stick versus yoke. A large number of modern military aircraft use a side stick. All the Airbus aircraft use a side stick. And it's interesting when you ask pilots. I've got four quotes from pilots. First quote, I prefer the yoke. It feels hefty, and I know exactly what my co-pilot is doing. The second quote, the side stick ergonomics are unmatched. It gives you room to focus on the systems. Next quote, it's really personal. I trained on yokes, so I stick with them. And the fourth quote, sticks are sensitive, but perfect for rapid maneuvers. Yokes win on precision. So you can see there are many pilots who prefer yokes and many pilots who prefer sticks. And I think, as far as pilots are concerned, the jury is out on coming to any conclusion one way or another.
So Mike 747436 sounds like he flies a 747-436. Truly shocking that I know a known fault with a pitot system wasn't acted on sooner. I will remember that the unreliable airspeed checklist procedure was part of subsequent simulator checks following this accident, even though I was a 747 pilot, Boeing pilot. There you go,
Yeah,
Richard.
well, we absolutely agree with you, Mike, and thank you for that statement as a Boeing 747 pilot. And it's good to hear that the unreliable airspeed checklist procedure is something that is trained on, and there's simulator checks for. And we need to ensure that all airlines train their pilots equally with these checklist procedures and what to do in the event of a surprise like the autopilot and auto throttle suddenly disengaging in the middle of a flight.
And if my memory serves me correctly, 436 designator is a Boeing designator for a British Airways 747. I think I'm right on that one. So, Dinosaurus 5406, surely the attitude indicator was still working. That alone would have saved them, of course. Richard.
Yeah, absolutely. a correct observation. The attitude indicator was definitely still performing correctly, and the airspeed indication loss obviously diverted the attention of the pilots focusing on the problem with the loss of airspeed indication, but not seeing what they did know in terms of the attitude indication. And it's much more, as previous commenters have pointed out, to do with the psychology of the reaction to a surprise event than it is to do with the information failure from the aircraft. And you're quite correct to point out that this could have been avoided. And the previous comment followed the unreliable airspeed checklist procedure exactly on the mark. And the procedure was not followed, and the valid information from the cockpit was not followed.
Yeah. Stephen Reed. Steve, we get a few from Stephen. He always asks great questions. 8732. While I agree that the pilots these days are too dependent on the automation, I genuinely believe verbal communication in the cockpit is the more important issue. Yeah. Time and time again, I hear stressed pilots in emergency situations speaking in very general terms. For example, we've lost control. What is happening? I don't understand. Or even just not saying anything at all. You guys really hit the nail on the head when you said procedures really went out the window. When the autopilot disconnected, if co-pilot Bonin had said, my aircraft, airspeed unreliable, pitching up, etc., there is no doubt in my mind co-pilot Robert would have realized and the stall warning was valid and corrected the mistake immediately. Also, Captain Dubois may have reached the conclusion faster than he eventually did had he entered the cockpit and heard straight away from Bonin. Autopilot disconnected, no airspeed data, I've been pulling back on the stick, etc. I would suggest United Airlines 1549 is a textbook example of pilots communicating and working together to solve a problem. Thanks again for all the hard work you both put in. I love the show.
I think, Stephen, that's a great analysis, and I fully agree with your observations. And we will take up your suggestion to take a look at a positive example, United Airways 1549, of how pilots can communicate with each other and can work together to solve a problem. So thank you for your input. And again, it's really encouraging for us to hear from pilots and pilots who are willing to share their experiences like you've done.
Indeed. Now, Teresa Corrigan, 3076. Good afternoon. Wow. I got to wondering, when I was a child in the 60s, were there more frequent air crashes on the news, or is that just a false memory? Thank you again. Teresa's in Canada.
Yeah.
Richard.
Um, it is not that your memory is failing you, Teresa. It is a fact from the statistics. The number of accidents and the number of fatalities has come down enormously since the 60s. We've actually got the complete set of statistics and an analysis of those statistics. Maybe, Jeffrey, you'd like to chip in on the Boeing analysis that you were looking at.
Yeah. Look, absolutely, Richard. Since the 1960s, Boeing has put out a global jet safety document every year. It excludes the Russian Federation, but it includes every other part of the world. And when jets were first introduced in 1959 stroke 1960, and we're putting these figures up on the screen now. There were 37 crashes per 1 million departures. So that reflected the fact that pilots were having a great deal of trouble transitioning from much slower piston engine aircraft to the new 707s and 727s and DC-8s and other jets. By 1964, that number had reduced dramatically down to 5 crashes per 1 million departures. Today, it's basically zero. It's one or less than one fatal crash per 1 million departures. And at the same time, the number of flights has gone up. So last year, there were 40.6 million flights. Some amazing stats. And again, we're showing you some graphs on the screen at the moment that demonstrate. And you can find, we'll put a link in just the details below to the Boeing website where you can actually download those reports yourself and have a look at them. They're fascinating pieces of work. And as I said, they cover all aircraft and they're simply done to help the industry understand the dynamics of where we're going. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's from that report that I got the statistic, for example, that 2023 was the first year where there were no fatal accidents at all.
Yeah.
And the Boeing stats cover all kind of aircraft manufacturer, except as Jeffrey pointed out, the Russian manufacturer.
And just one final aspect of that, and if you read the report, you'll see it. And that is that if you're traveling in the United States, and the recent accidents notwithstanding, or in Europe, Australia, Canada, and lots of parts of Southeast Asia, the accident rate is simply zero. Other parts of the world, it's sadly a bit higher, like Africa. And so but those stats that Boeing produce are for the entire world except Russia. So, Richard, that's about all we've got time for today. Tomorrow, we're going to get back to MH370 and those backlog of questions we've got. And then on Saturday, we're going to take a break. And then on Sunday, we're going to visit the DC-10 crash on Erebus in 1979, an extraordinary tragedy, terrible mix-up. It really is. And then next week, we've got some exciting stuff coming up, Richard, have we not?
Indeed, we're going to be revisiting, for example, the sighting of Captain Martin Smith and the aircraft that was seen the day after in the Indian Ocean. We're also going to come back to the list of the data that's missing, which could have helped and could still help with the MH370 investigation. So, got a number of new information to share with the viewers.
And don't forget, we're going to do a very, very thorough deep dive into all the debris. The debris that some people say was never there, and some people say it was planted. But we've got a very detailed analysis of it all, and we'll share that as well, Richard.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's going to be a really exciting week next week. Lots of things to look forward to. So, Richard, thanks for all your work. Viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, supporting us, your kind words, a tremendous number of really positive, lovely comments, great questions. Really appreciate them. So please subscribe, please like us, please keep the comments coming. We do appreciate them. And please tune in tomorrow where we look at a whole bunch of MH370 questions. Thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.